Just a quick book placement, product placement for my books under the author name Derek Hemingway. First, we have the first installment in the Human Saga, which is my epic trilogy of novellas about a future civilization of corporate fascism that is being invaded by an alien cult. We have The Mortician's Daughter, a dark fantasy set in Mesoamerica about a sorceress who blocks out the sun to create a kingdom of darkness and evil, full of ghosts and monsters. It's fucking awesome. Part 2 of the Human Saga, and then part 3. There's currently my first full-length novel in the works, so be on the lookout for that. That's about all. That heathen bastard! Hello, everyone. Welcome back to That Heathen Bastard. Remember, this is a channel for talking points. It's a platform for talking points and development of my political ideology and so forth. This is not a news show. With that being said, we are going to continue on the topic of race. Yay! Well, I know it pisses some people off, but I don't care. I don't give a shit. I got the First Amendment protecting me, man. I love free speech. So today I want to talk about reparations, or more specifically, I want to talk about what you should know before you demand them. This is largely meant for the people who want them, but it's also a very good message in general. A little bit of history you should know. First and foremost, let's talk about European immigration to America and what that was really all about. The story of whites in America is not a bunch of conquerors abusing whoever they come across. No, no, no. It's the story of a bunch of people, essentially Eurotrash, coming to North America in order to get a second chance at life, because a lot of them were poor, out of work, perpetually out of work, criminals, degenerates, alcoholics, and even religious zealots that were too dangerous to have around. Looking at you, Puritans. And generally speaking, that's what most white immigration to America was. Yes, the conquest of the continent was an abuse, but what followed, at least in terms of immigration, was just people looking at a second chance at life. And they got it, and look what we've done. We invented the internet. We created one of the world's most powerful economies. Look what a bunch of throwaways from Europe went and did with a second chance at life. America should be about second chances. That's an amazing thing. You give people a genuine chance, and look what they do with it. Because first waivers were, generally speaking, they weren't exactly upper crust, but they were relatively well off, some of them. Many of the second waivers were political undesirables. Many. And that comes over prior to the Revolutionary War. They're the people who fought the Revolutionary War. What follows is the second wave, which is more Puritans who are fleeing religious persecution like the first wave, drunks, criminals, and general scum of the earth, what people would see them as. Pretty rough. Pretty rough. And what inspired it largely was the land grab. A lot of them were Irish or Norwegian or even German, again wanting a second chance at life. And then third waivers were largely Polish and some even Jewish, fleeing communism. The Statue of Liberty, the phrase the Statue of Liberty, is about the third wave immigration from Europe, the third wave of European immigration that created the white population of America we see today. Give us your poor, give us your tired. Basically, we're saying, oh, Europe, you want to send your undesirables here? Cool, we'll take them. That's basically what it was. A lot of them were fleeing people like Joseph Stalin, a horrible monster. Dude, you can even mention Stalin to a hardcore communist, and they'll just look at you like, I know, right? Like, he was horrible and evil. So that's kind of what people objected. Yes, there were upper class people in America who objected to the second and third wave, saying, these people are dirty, we don't want them here. Like, shut up. Shut up. All right? People deserve a second chance at life. And sometimes they use it and they go and they do great things. Just because someone's an alcoholic doesn't mean they can't get sober or can't get clean. I mean, if you think that, you're delusional. But that's the truth about European immigration to America. Basically, we're the descendants of white trash that got a second chance at life. And generally speaking, the majority of America are actually dirt poor whites. The majority of us are dirt poor. Working class, 9 to 5 Joe Schmo. And when you decide to verbally attack a the white race, saying, "Oh, you're terrorists, you're evil, you're bad," it's like you're literally just attacking Joe Schmo 9 to 5. The common, ordinary working man is just like, "Hey, I'm just trying to work to feed my kids. What's your problem?" Yeah, what is your problem? That is the majority. So the idea of slavery being such a widespread problem, oh my God, we need reparations. Like, you're literally going to take money from Joe Schmo, make it harder for him to feed his kids? What a lovely person you must be. That you're so selfish that you just demand reparations, which, by the way, for something you yourself never experienced, that is the guilt by association fallacy. You know what else would be guilt by association? Climate activists. You know who was super green and super into green stuff? The Nazis. The Nazis were into green stuff. Hitler was a green guy. He was all for the environment. And they actually did a fair amount of nature conservationism. So what? Should we now start chopping down those evil racist trees? Or are you finally going to admit that there is no guilt by association and it's just a logical fallacy? No, you're probably not going to admit that. You're going to chop down the evil racist trees. You're going to go from green to black in like 5 days. I swear. But no, the majority of white people are dirt poor, including myself. That's just how it be. You're going to take money from Joe Schmo, you should suffer some consequence for that. The truth of the matter is, the black slaves in America were owned by the 1%, by well-off, rich people, by rich snobs. And many of those families by now don't even have the money to pay you anyway. That's hilarious. You're going to demand money from people who can't pay? You must be really big fans of Weimar Germany. That's the shit that caused World War II, I hope you realize. You were owned by the 1%, and sometimes you were even owned by members of your own race on occasion. That wasn't quite often as the same, but it did happen. Not to mention you were sold to whites by other blacks. That is hilarious. And here's another known fact. There were actually more whites sold to Arabs as slaves than there were blacks sold to whites as slaves. Yeah, funny about that. You don't look up the Barbary Coast if you have a weak stomach, because a lot of the time it was blonde women being taken off by some Arab slave owner to God knows where to have God knows what done to her. You don't want to think about it. You really don't. That kind of sexual fetishizing. And it happens a lot to Native girls, too, because Native girls and women, Native American females, get taken away, they get kidnapped, and they go disappearing, and God only knows what happens to them after that. It's like the same thought. Like, you don't want to think about it, right? It would probably churn your stomach. But yeah, you were owned, black people, you were owned by the 1%. So it's ridiculous for you to come after, just the whole white race as a whole. That's absurd. It's the guilt by association fallacy. And it's also the same logic the powers in North Korea of someone being imprisoned because of the crimes of their grandparents. In North Korea, if your logic is in any way similar to the North Korean government, you've got some self-reflection to do. No joke. You've got some self-reflecting to do. They're very pro-guilt by association. They arrest people and imprison them for the crimes of their grandparents. Seriously. This is a thing that actually happens in North Korea. What a horrible country. There's actually a funny story. See, the WWF at the time was touring through the world, and they had Muhammad Ali as a guest referee as sort of a promotion, and him and Ric Flair and a bunch of the wrestlers got a bunch of their stuff confiscated when they came off the plane in North Korea, and they never got it back. Their stuff is still floating around in North Korea, and Muhammad Ali famously said to, I believe, Ric Flair, he sort of whispered to him, he says, "No wonder we hate these motherfuckers." Yeah, because you literally just went, you got robbed. Like, seriously. Like, North Korea is just horrible. They rob visitors, they intimidate, they lie, and they imprison you for the crimes of your grandparents. If your logic is anyway even remotely similar to theirs, you've got some self-reflection to do. It is a fallacy, because logic is the ability to take information and string it together in a way that makes sense. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. You know what? Let's put it to a syllogism. Okay? Let's put it to a syllogism to see if it's logical. Remember that the opening statement and the final statement must be cooperative. They don't have to necessarily correlate, but they have to be cooperative. But the middle statement has to correlate with them both. So let's put it to a syllogism. Okay? What's our opening premise? White people should pay reparations for slavery. But let's use the actual facts here. So, the 1% owned the slaves. Therefore, white people should pay reparations. Notice that? There's an inconsistency. White people, the 1%. The rich 1% owned you. See how that works? It's logically inconsistent. And that means it's not factual. That means it's irrational. And because it's irrational, purposeful meaning cannot be extracted from it, because that's how irrationality works. Rationalizing something makes it easier to take meaning away from it, and you learn something new about the truth. So it is absolutely a fallacy. And it's funny that you should want reparations from the rich because you basically support the rich. BLM is as much of a buzzword commercial thing as it is a movement. You sell shirts, you sell hoodies, and with some of your leaders, bitch, you are rapidly becoming the 1%. So that is fucking hilarious. But as just a brick talk about the history of reparations, it's actually a terrible idea. Allow me to explain that to you for just a moment. See, Germany started World War One, okay? Germany started World War One, and they hurt a lot of people. Very terrible. But what's interesting is that when they demanded reparations from be paid by Germany, see, they signed the Treaty of Versailles, and what ended up happening is that the treaty wrote into law a major payment plan that the Germans could not afford. They could not afford to make the full payment, and in the end, they ended up causing innocent people in Germany to suffer. Right? There was also reparations paid in the South for the Civil War, and they had to both pay that and pay their veterans at the same time. And that also caused major suffering during the Reconstruction era. That's the thing. Reparations assumes the individual who has to pay can pay. And what happens if they can't? Good question. What does happen? Well, that comes to redistribution and inflation. The thing about redistribution is money does not exist in a collected form. It does exist in diversified locations and accounts. The rich actually move all their money into multiple different bank accounts and in multiple different ways, and sometimes even store it offshore, because if one account fails and they lose a bunch of money, well, they got another account that they can use to build their fortune again. Things happen. Money is decentralized when it's privately owned. And it's supposed to be decentralized because that's safer. It's like Pearl Harbor. You centralize all your ships in one place, and someone comes along and blows them all to hell. Similarly, you don't want to keep your money all in one place, because then shit happens and you lose all your money. And you don't want that. Nobody wants that. So what this ends up happening is when you try to redistribute, to compensate for the diversified nature of the money, In order to get the full payment, you have to make the person print more money. Printing money makes the money less rarefied, and then you get inflation. And what does inflation do? It lowers the value of the money over time. So any redistribution scheme, including reparations, causes inflation. The higher the price, the greater the inflation. The greater the inflation, the greater the resulting suffering. Next thing you know, Hans has to take all of his Mutter and Oma's money, load it into a wheelbarrow, and you have an entire wheelbarrow, a whole wheelbarrow full of Reichsmarks just to buy one loaf of bread. That's mass inflation. That's what the Treaty of Versailles did to Germany. And while what happened in the South during the Reconstruction was nowhere near that level of suffering, that's what would likely happen if you honestly went ahead with the reparation plan that you're talking about. You're going to cause inflation and you're going to make people suffer in a system that is already under inflation. Could you imagine if they wanted reparations like right the fuck now? You have both inflation from that and inflation from Joe Biden and his idiotic policies and build back broke. You know what would happen is that the American dollar would lose so much value, people would literally begin starving to death in a first world country. But go figure. These people have no understanding of basic economics. And at the end of the day, their thinking is me, me, me. They don't care about you. They don't care about Hans and his Oma and Mutter. They don't care about the poor people. They don't care about the homeless. They care about themselves. They might say otherwise, but their actions reveal the truth. They care about themselves first and you next. At the end of the day, it is important we take responsibility for all our circumstances, even the ones caused by others. Because if you can demand justice, but you honestly think someone who victimized you is going to give you the justice you're looking for? Of course not. They're just going to try to get away with it again. You don't go to Hannibal Lecter and say, hey, Hannibal, we want you to pay for eating people. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't eat people. Like, no, bitch, he's going to cut your heart out and have it for dinner. He's just going to do it again. You want to recover from something horrible someone did to you? That's your responsibility. That's unfortunately going to have to be your responsibility because no one's going to do it for you. You have to take responsibility for all your circumstances, including the circumstances caused by others. I'm sorry, that's just how life is. Life is suffering. Get with the program. If somebody robs you, you're just going to have to make back that money yourself. You're probably not going to see any justice. You're going to see the criminals who robbed you punished, but the likelihood of seeing your stuff come back to you in its original form is unlikely. They probably hid it somewhere. It's probably been claimed by someone who saw it somewhere. The police probably take a cut, maybe. Shit happens. At this point, justice is little more than revenge. So really, if you want to make your money back, you're going to have to do it yourself. And if you want to recover from the circumstances that you believe are caused by slavery, you're going to have to do that yourself. Any attempt at reparations is going to cause mass inflation conjoined with the Bidenflation. It's a foolish idea. Because of the decentralized nature of currency, the need to print more, you're basically going to have a Weimar Germany kind of situation. Potentially. It's too early to know all the dangers of any reparations attempt, but this is the kind of thing you need to know before you demand such things. Right? This is the information you need to have. Period. You've got to know this shit. And these are all well-known facts. If you feel like you need to fact-check me because, oh, he sounds like a white supremacist, go ahead and fact-check me. And the only thing you're going to see is exactly what I just said. Unless, of course, you're using an insane far-left source. Salon is terrible, and so is The Guardian. They're basically trash. I actually remember on my old channel, there was a time when The Guardian tried to claim that the sound of the baby's heartbeat was really the sound of cells specializing. So supposedly you can hear a microscopic process well below the range of human hearing through a fucking stethoscope. Hilarious. You can't count on sources like that. They're full of shit. If you're going to any real sources, you're only going to see me affirmed. I do all my research. I do all my research. And I prefer to name drop sources rather than link them below, because how often do you actually click on the links? Seriously. Not very often. In my experience, people don't really click on those links most of the time. Anyway, with that being said, there will be a link in the description down below. Please click on it to buy and download my books. And as always, tschüss. Peace.